no matter what you think the root cause of the problem is, it's always the people. And assembling the team is key. And as we said before, what's a great team in one organization doesn't mean it would be a great team in the other organization. And it's your job as a manager to solve this puzzle. And in my experience, the key, the glue to building the team is figuring out the chemistry between team members. And if the chemistry is great, not only you as a manager will have almost no headaches related to the internals of the team, but the team will be able to challenge you as well. And the good follow-up question could be, what does this chemistry mean? Isn't it something you use to describe relationships between couples, for example, right? Yeah, it could be. But if we try to break down chemistry in the context of organization, context of, let's say, development or design team, for me, it means 3 components.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Ocel, VP of Innovation at This.Labs, here for another episode of the Leadership Exchange. Today, I'm here with Alex Yarotsky. Alex is the CTO at Hubstaff. Alex, how are you doing today?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I mean, we have such a great topic. We're going to be talking about building and scaling teams and kind of the challenges that you've faced. But I thought one thing that would be interesting to kick us off is, we introduced you as the CTO at Hubstaff. I know both at Hubstaff and at previous experiences, you've really gotten to experience some unique growth situations and had some great experience in building teams. Could you maybe kind of explain a little bit about how that's been for you the last few years, the opportunities you've had to experience such growth?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the industry for over 15 years now, right? And as a lot of people who are watching us, I started as an individual contributor. I started as a software engineer. I worked for a while for software consultancy companies and then moved to work for startups. And in 2014, I joined this startup, back then a startup called Ocel, and it was a huge run for me. It was one of the best teams I've ever worked with. And I joined the company when the development team was relatively small. We were like less than 20 people back then, no product team at all. And the scale of this company was rapid. Like everything you ever hear or read about, like how these high growth companies are moving forward, like we've seen everything there. It was an amazing ride. Learned a lot there, seen a lot there, overseen a lot of initiatives in the company. But then, as the next milestone, I moved on and joined my current company, Hubstaff. Back then, as a VP of engineering, and then moved to the CTO position. Been with the company for almost 5.5 years now. And again, another example of a rapid growth, incredible scale. When I joined the company again, we were at about just 20 developers. You see, I love joining companies at this stage. Now we're much bigger than this. Seen everything through this ride. And what became fascinated for me over all these years with these rapidly growing companies, although I joined Ocel as a software developer, during the time there, I started building this fascination with scaling people, scaling organizations, because figuring out tech stack is relatively straightforward exercise. You have input, outcome. Now you need to put this man in the middle, which is your tech stack. Relatively straightforward. A lot of tutorials written about this, a lot of books. You can figure it out. But people are very different. Everybody with their own perspective, with their strong opinion, with their background, both personal and professional. And now you put all of these different people in the same room and you ask them to perform. And as we all know, this magic just doesn't work quite often. Yeah. And now your job as a manager is to figure it out. And after being with multiple companies on this crazy run, on this crazy scale, working with so many people, I can confidently say like every team is very different, and the approach to manage every team should be very different and very unique. And this is probably something that I would like to discuss today.
Yeah, I'm curious, looking back on your career, if you'd agree with this. One of the things that I've thought a little bit about is this idea of can managers create successful and fulfilled teams if they've never experienced one? I think, if we all look back at our careers, I've similarly been in the
Mhm.
industry now for 15, 20 years. And when I think back on my favorite team I was ever a member of, I realized that like amazing teams are rare. That's not to say most teams are bad, but
Right,
amazing teams are
right,
rare. And until you've had one, I feel like when you have that first amazing team, it's a transformative experience, either as a manager or as an individual contributor, to
right.
realize what a team is capable of. Like as you look back, and I don't know if it was Top Teller was something earlier, but like, can is it possible for managers to create amazing teams if they've never experienced to that point in their career, like those very high functioning teams?
Well, this is a great question because I think I've been in somewhat similar situations through the parts of my career. On the one hand, I was lucky enough to work with some great managers before. But again, as you said, um, you can rarely see like truly amazing team, right? Even in sports, right? Like in every league, there are plenty of teams, but there are few champions, right? Um, some team some teams go on decades without any championship, and like they're a great team, but like what's wrong there, right? Um, so as somebody who's been there, my best solution or best advice to somebody who thinks they're in this situation is to go and find through reading and watching and maybe talking to people you look up for what does this great team means for you, because again people are different. You as a manager different from the other managers because your style, your approach will be different. Define what does it mean, what is this great team for you. And I know it sounds very vague because like okay what does it mean, like great team, like I want to have like great developers on my team, isn't it great, right? No, but like do the exercise. Set the timer for 30 minutes, take a pen, take paper, or if you like open Notion, and just write down everything that comes in your head, like okay, so this is how I envision the process, this is how I envision we handle an incident, this is how I envision we handle an escalation, this is how I envision we have a regular daily meeting, right? And at the end of this first exercise, this first 30 minutes, you'll have a bunch of text that I suggest you revisit later, a few days later,
Mm.
because you will start seeing some specific traits, some specific processes that you define as, well, let's call it perfect for now. Perfect
Yeah.
processes, ideal processes. And it will start giving you a definition of what this great team is, what is important to them. But that's your perspective only, right? What is a great team in one organization isn't a great team in the other organization, right? So the
Hmm.
input of
Yeah.
the stakeholders, input of the manager, of the other managers also matters. Collect their feedback, what they expect from your team, because ideally for the rest of the organization, your design team or product team or engineering team should be a black box. Like they give you the input, they expect specific output. Everything that happens inside is a black box, and it's your job to figure out the internals of this black box. So understand the expectations, look up for the other people, and hear the best practices, and put it
Hmm.
together.
I like that. I like that
And
idea of
right,
having like peers that you write this down. I love that and review it, but I
right,
also love this idea that you write it down and you share it with peers. Because I feel like becoming a manager for the first time or one of the
right.
relatively early times is a bit like being a first time parent.
Mm-hmm.
You do so many silly things with your first child because you just have heard that's a thing people do when they
Exactly.
have kids, and most of them just flake off once you realize
Mm-hmm.
that's not working for you or it doesn't make sense or you don't know why people do it. And I feel like a lot of managers are that way. Sometimes you can go years doing something and literally all it
Exactly.
takes is a peer to go, "Why are you doing that?" And then you
100%.
go, "I honestly don't know why I'm doing that." And then all of
I
a
thought it
sudden
was
you
the most
evolve.
reasonable thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like it's interesting that a lot of people think that their experience of being individual contributor doesn't translate to experience being a manager. Yeah, I agree. Like these are two very different jobs. Like if you're a great developer, it doesn't imply you will become a great manager. Not at all. but a lot of the experiences, a lot of the practices actually transition well there. Because like you, again, like we discussed, like this idea of having peers, especially while being the first time manager, supposedly having no support. Maybe you're in this type of organization. Well,
Yeah.
let's say you're a first time founder, right? And now you find yourself in a
Mm-hmm.
situation where your organization is growing and all your other founders are also the first time managers. They're like, I mean, I'd love to help. I'm in the same situation. I don't know what to do, right? But what translates really well is, for example, let's say you were a developer and all developers know that code reviews is an amazing tool. You could have written the best code you could have thought about, but then you
Yeah.
ask somebody else to review it and they just destroy you. But then after a few rounds of review, you're like, well, now this is just a piece of art. And I would have never come to this uh, place without this review. So code reviews work for managers as well. Code review your management decisions. Why not?
I like that. And as you move to develop a team, right? So, not just for new managers, this is now for everybody. Kind of get into the topic that we're talking about, the teams that you've been building at
Mm-hmm.
Hubstaff and elsewhere in your career. Obviously, teams are complicated. There's a lot that goes into this. But,
Yep.
if we're going to distill it down to maybe what you think is the biggest indicator of a high functioning team, is there something that you think about that you point to as being something that, if you can work on optimizing or paying attention to this thing, that really is a good step towards building a high functioning team?
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing that I love repeating here and there is no matter what you think the root cause of the problem is, it's always the people. And assembling the team is key. And as we said before, what's a great team in one organization doesn't mean it would be a great team in the other organization. And it's your job as a manager to solve this puzzle. So, okay, we know people, that's what mattered the most. Now, how do we build the right team? And in my experience, the key, the glue to building the team is figuring out the chemistry between the team members. And if the chemistry is great, not only you as a manager will have almost no headaches related to the internals of the team, but the team will be able to challenge you as well, asking for more, surprising you as well. And the good follow up question could be, what does this chemistry mean? Isn't it something you use to describe relationships between couples, for example, right? Yeah, it could be. But if we try to break down chemistry in the context of organization, context of, let's say, development or design team, I would say it means, for me, it means three components. Component number one, being respectful to each other no matter what. Understanding that we all come from different backgrounds, from different experiences, and very likely we may see the very same situation very differently. It doesn't mean some of us are wrong or some of us are right, absolutely, but it just means our past experiences dictate how we see things. Secondly, it is important for the team members to be very direct with each other, because we all know the situation. We've all been in this situation where you want to say somebody something, like give them feedback, but you're like, maybe I shouldn't. Like, I don't know how they respond. Maybe it's out of context. I don't feel confident about this. Which leads us immediately to the third point, which actually it's not the third point. It brings us back to the first point, which can be summarized as training your emotional intelligence, right? Again, understanding what's happening behind the scenes in this particular person's mind, and no matter what, treating them with respect. If you have these two things together, it builds chemistry, which leads to, well, great teams.
What's interesting about that is this idea that, again, yeah, chemistry sometimes gets a bad rap. Some people use this as a justification for having teams that lack any form of diversity, that
Mm-hmm.
people are all the same. And that might be a hack for some cheap form of chemistry. But I mean, pick up basketball teams can have chemistry, right? I mean, like, you can see people that get dropped into situations with complete strangers people who have a really high affinity for these skills can naturally form chemistry with the people around them. If you want to see kind of what your chemistry level is right now, one thing we did at our team at this dot is we did an escape room together. And that might sound cliche, but I'm telling you, you learn a lot about your team's chemistry by how you break up the task of an escape room and how you handle it. And I don't just mean the stress of the timer,
Right.
just literally you learn so much about your team. And so I like that idea that chemistry can be something that very distinct individuals have, very diverse individuals have, people that barely have known each other have, as long as you are capable of and practiced in applying those paradigms.
I have a different test for chemistry that is way simpler than
Then an escape
gathering
room?
everybody
It's
into
not
the
as fun
escape room.
though.
Uh, so the test I use, I call it the number of inappropriate jokes.
Mm.
If
Mm-hmm.
like count the number of inappropriate jokes that team tell to each other. They're not just on the edge, they are beyond this edge. And if these jokes take place in the team and nobody feels offended, you know you got it.
Oh, I see. Went a different direction. So the
Right.
idea is the amount of comfort that people have with kind of being on the edges of what would be considered maybe polite. Not that people are being rude to each other, but
Yeah,
rather
no,
that people are comfortable and are knowledgeable about each other enough that they can dance close to a line, comfortable in that
exactly.
relationship they've built.
Exactly. People can joke at each other weaknesses or life experiences, and everybody's totally comfortable about that because again, like they have this chemistry. They are straightforward, they're respectful, and they understand that the person on the other side, like they have no intention to hurt me. Like we are in a safe zone.
All right, we have more for this conversation, but first, just
Sure.
like to take a moment to thank our sponsor today, This Labs. This episode is brought to you by This Labs, the experts in modern web development and consulting. If you're looking to scale up your development teams efficiently, or you need assistance in turning your innovative ideas into reality with some robust proofs of concept, This Labs has you covered. This Labs doesn't just build software, they build partnerships. We collaborate closely with your team to understand your unique challenges and craft tailored solutions that drive real results. Join the many companies that have accelerated their growth and innovation with the help of This Labs. Visit this.co to discover how we can help you take your projects to the next level. Thanks to This Labs for sponsoring this episode and my team for allowing me to have awesome conversations like this. Now back to our episode. So, Alex, I wanted to talk about kind of what you need to do to build that level of chemistry and trust on a team, because I think what you've described, yes, the ability to joke about others, but I would say also the ability to be self-deprecating, the ability to be willing to say some either in a joke or seriously, I struggle with this or I
Mhm.
did badly at this. That is a level of trust most people, or I don't know, most people, a lot of people have not experienced in their careers. And I know that your teams, this is part of the fundamental DNA of what makes them work. So I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit about how you build that trust and foster that trust on your teams.
Sure. So the way we do it, and it actually, let me start over. So one of the things that I think we do in a wrong way in our industry is we have this sort of strict separation between hard skills and soft skills, right? And we also imply by saying this that hard skills, well, you can learn them. That's like a a programming language, right? A design tools, whatever. You can learn them, no problem. And there are soft skills like communication, for example, or whatnot. And we imply that, well, the soft skills, you probably are born with them or you learn them as you grow up, and then that's it. They, no way back, right? And soft skills is actually, as we already discussed, that what defines the chemistry, right? And I strongly believe that in the vast majority of cases, of course, there are some outliers, but almost all the time, you can teach people soft skills. And the best way to do that, and that's how we do that at Hubstaff, is through the practice of regular feedback sharing. And the way we do that is through two channels. One is contextual feedback, and the second one is regular one on ones. So, contextual feedback is pretty simple. Whenever something happened in your team that you think deserves attention, like maybe there was a conflict or somebody said something inappropriate or something along the lines, right? You give this person individual feedback in the context of what just happened. So let's say you observed an inappropriate conversation during the code review, for example. Um, while the memories are fresh, you carefully address this in the feedback to the person in charge of this feedback. You explain why do you think it was incorrect. You explain how they could have done it better. You ask why they decided, which is important, why they decided to respond in this manner. And it starts a conversation. Again, the person on the receiving side might disagree with you strongly. Totally okay. But the goal behind this conversation is to get aligned on like, hey, these are our expectations, these are our standards. I understand we all people, we all get emotional, whatever. Um, but we gotta hold ourselves accountable to maintain specific standards we have in our organization. So that's one way of sharing feedback. The other way of sharing feedback is through the practice of regular one-on-ones. For example, at Hubstaff, we have bi-weekly one-on-ones. And we try to almost never skip the one-on-ones unless like everybody's super busy, it's just crunch time and just, yeah, let's save ourselves a little bit of time and push this damned feature to production. It happens sometimes, let's face it. But other than this, we try not to skip the one-on-ones, even if we have nothing to talk about related to work. And let me explain why. So this one-on-ones is a private space between manager and their developer, designer, their teammate. And this private space exists to build relationships, to build chemistry. And this is important because we human beings, we're social creatures. We like hanging out, we like spending time with the people we like, right? And in order for us managers to build these trustworthy relationships with our people, we use the one-on-ones. And on these one-on-ones, again, the one-on-ones are always about the team member, not about you, manager, asking for status updates, criticizing or anything, right? It's about them. So
Classic
on this
mistake.
one,
Yep.
yeah, on because I mean, and we all do these mistakes even when we know that what one-on-one is about. Like I sometimes find myself in a situation where we have a one-on-one. I'm like, I just recalled this project. Can you give me a quick status update, right? But again, it happens sometimes. But overall, the idea is to build relationships and trust. And on these one-on-ones, it's all about the team members. They bring their struggles, they bring their concerns, and your job as a manager to understand them and help to solve the problem so that the team member benefit from it and learn from it, understand the problem, be in their shoes, there with them. Um, it sounds easier than it's actually done. The first few one-on-ones with the new team member are always like sort of awkward because like it's basically like dating in some way, like you learn about each other and it feels a little bit awkward while you are in this build up phase. But as it goes, you inevitably build this like channel of trustworthy communication where you open up to them, you open up, they open up to you, and now suddenly over the course of many one-on-ones you can discuss things you could have not thought about before, which allows you to be very direct with the person on the receiving end and them being very comfortable receiving critique and feedback from you.
Yeah, I like that. It's very difficult too, though, for managers to have people opening up to you at that level, and very hard for people to open up like that to your managers because
Right.
it really puts an extra onus, I think, on managers to be very capable of separating the conversations they have from the
Mm-hmm.
work that's being performed.
Yeah.
It's very easy for me to say to my managers, "Hey, this is what I've been struggling with." Now, granted, it should be on me to also share the things I'm doing well and
Sure.
for balance, but if I share the things I struggle with, it's a lot easier when my manager's thinking about promotions. Well, he's struggling with this and he's struggling with this and he's struggling with this. So, I don't know if they're ready. You really got to be capable of looking at the output and keeping those two realms separate. That's
Right.
certainly something that needs to be trained. That's not easy to do by any stretch.
100%. And like for example, the way like we address like when the new team member is joining us or we train the new engineering manager, we actually explain, we say it out loud that like the first few one-on-ones are going to be awkward. Like let's not use like any of these icebreakers that like tutorials on how to do one-on-ones suggest or anything. Like be straightforward. Like, hey, this is why we do this one-on-ones. It's not about like another status update call. It's not another waste of time. That's for you and I to build healthy relationships. Let's use this time for this, because in the end of the day, we want to like each other. We want to enjoy working with each other. So this is the only goal of these calls.
It's really interesting too because I've found in the course of my career that there's just certain types of feedback. I used to think I was bad at accepting feedback, but I realized that actually a lot of feedback is given badly, I think.
Okay.
A lot of feedback is given from the perspective of this went wrong or even this went right. But the point is that there isn't a lot of analysis of why. There's a lot of inherent randomness in life. That's how I feel about. And so I think as long as people are mission aligned and put in effort, to some extent, everything is a little stochastic. Everything is a little bit variable. It might have a 95% chance of failure, but you know what? 5% of the time it'll fail, perhaps of no fault of the people who are engaged in it. That's just life. And so I found in my life that I disliked feedback that was given based on the result of a dice roll,
Mm-hmm.
but I've really learned to love feedback that's given from how I was prepared for that dice roll. Hey, I felt like we didn't put in our maximum effort. We were really hoping that we were just going to get lucky on this one. Or, hey, our plan did not make sense. You guys executed a bad plan really well, but that was not a good plan. And I find like that's where managers need to work on, is getting a lot better at that mission, sharing that feedback in context of a mission or in context of a plan, to depersonalize it a little bit and make people kind of wanting to talk about failures because they're like, I want to know what I can do better next time. Like it gets a hunger there.
There is actually an interesting quote about feedback. The most valuable feedback is the one that hurts the most. But it also important to, like, the way of delivering this feedback is critical, because I've seen cases and I've done it myself, unfortunately, but that's part of the learning curve. When you deliver feedback to somebody in the very wrong way once, and you lost them forever.
Oh,
That's it. They will
yes.
never open up to you ever again.
You wouldn't think that that's possible, and it doesn't almost seem fair for it to be possible, but that's part of the
Yes.
heaviness, the weight of being
Yes.
in leadership, is that it's
Yeah.
true. You can absolutely lose someone. You could even have a good relationship and lose them at any point with a bad comment.
Exactly.
That's the crazy part. It's
Yes.
not just at the beginning.
And like the way we started giving feedback at Hubstaff, not that long ago, by the way. I mean, because we have a sort of tough team in a way that like they're sort of tough individuals. They can handle tough feedback. And we got pretty used to it. Like, hey, everybody's tough. I can be very straightforward. Nobody takes it personal, right? But then as we started growing, again, people of very different backgrounds started joining us. But this inertia of you thinking that everybody as tough as the core team is runs with you for a while, and you start giving feedback to the new people in a way you used to give people to give feedback to the old people, and they're like, whoa, 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 what, why are you hurting me? Like this is unprofessional, right? And like the way we started giving feedback as we started growing more rapidly is, instead of just bluntly giving like feedback, guys, why, right? Like, why did you do it this way, right? You give feedback in the retrospective manner. Instead of giving feedback, you ask questions. Again, depending on the context, depending on the incident, depending on the situation, you as a manager do your homework and you come prepared with a set of questions. You don't give feedback, you ask questions. And through
Amen.
addressing these questions, most of the time, if not always, people realize what they could have done differently, and they actually give you the response which is a long-term solution to the problem, or they give you a response in a way that now makes the feedback you wanted to give them absolutely appropriate in any way or shape you want to give it to them.
Or if it never comes out, they have no idea what you're trying to ask with those questions. It teaches you that you have a lot more alignment to build on your team,
Right.
because the things which you thought should have been obvious to people, they had no concept of. And that can be a challenging thing for a leader as well, to realize, like,
Exactly.
I didn't even give them the foundation on which they would have made a correct decision. So
Yep.
I need to work on that. So great. Well, listen, there's one kind of final piece of this, which I think is interesting. It's talked about a lot when it comes to chemistry and high performing teams. And I think that is this concept of mission focus and alignment and commitment. I think I've heard other people call this like passion, but I think that those are often similar words that are maybe confused sometimes with each other. So I guess what I'm asking is, for the teams that you've built, the high functioning teams that you've built, what does that mission focus and that mission commitment mean to you? And what are the standards that you set for your team members?
Right. Well, this is a good question because looking back at our conversation, I can think that some of the things that I said, especially when I mentioned, well, you want to like each other and respect each other, it could sound to the other people like it's all rainbows and unicorns, which it isn't, right? And yeah, it isn't. Like every for-profit organization is like a sports team. We are there to win. We're there to crush our competitors, right? So we got to be competitive. We got to be aggressive. I mean, aggressive in a good way, right? Like we want to be willing to just crush the numbers, win it, etc. And yeah, it means you got to build a high performance team. Now, how you do that, right? And it always starts with, again, it's always easier said than done, but it always starts with hiring and training A players. And an A player is somebody who is competitive, who is eager to learn, who is eager to deliver. They do not settle for mediocre. They not importantly perfectionists, but they just want to be proud of what they do, whatever it is, right? And your job as a manager is to identify these people even early on in their career, because there are so many senior developers and they're very expensive. You can't hire all of them, right? But you still need to hire somebody to do the job. So it starts with hiring A players, even if they are early on in their career. Secondly, it's about setting expectations and standards, basically drawing the line of what's acceptable and what is unacceptable. And again, when you have A players on your team, you don't have to repeat twice to them. You give them the standards. If they disagree or have something to say, they will. But other than this, they take the standards, they go and execute. And maybe number three, not maybe, but number three is to keep this feedback sharing cycle. Because again, we deviate from our goal from time to time. We're human beings. We tend to do this. So the feedback sharing is about putting people back on track, reminding about standards, maybe highlighting some mistakes or some things that they could do better. And then it builds up inevitably the culture where everybody knows the standards. Everybody knows what's acceptable, what's not. And everybody doesn't want to work with people who are beyond these standards. So basically, you establish the culture that maintains itself. Because now, when you are not the one in charge of hiring and you ask one of your team members to go and hire, they want to hire the people they work with already. So they will have these high standards for the new candidates as well.
One thing that I think is interesting about that, though, is this idea that I think sometimes that competitiveness that you're talking about is can be confused with clout chasing, and can also be sort of hidden underneath people who are competitive in the sense of they want their team to win, but they are not necessarily personally aspirational. They're not trying to be the Kobe Bryant of their team,
Right.
but they want to be on a championship team. And I think that's one of those secret things too that can maybe make the hiring a little bit easier, is that I have met people who are not quote unquote passionate about the type of work that they do, but they knew that they were doing a job and they didn't want anybody to do that job better than them, because they wanted to keep getting paid more and more by better and better places to keep doing that job. So they had aspirations for their career, but not necessarily, for the love of the game type of idea. And I've had people that, I'm telling you, if I was starting a new team, I would pick them to be in the first couple people I would put on my team. But you know what? Those were people that were like, I have no aspirations to go farther up in the hierarchy of this company. because I have certain things at home that I want to fulfill. But when they did their work, it was always perfect. They always put in the care and they were always reliable. And it's like, I think that's what's interesting is that A playerness can manifest in a lot of different ways that I think managers need to pay attention to. It's not just wanting to take the last shot. It's wanting to be not wanting to lose, however that happens, taking the shot or not taking the shot.
An A player, it doesn't mean one specific profile, like you said, like Kobe, right? It's not, all of them are not Kobe, right? They're very different. And they can be even opposite to each other in so many ways. But when you put them together in a team, they support each other. When one has weaknesses, it's the strengths of the other one and the other way around. And put together, they're a great team. It's like a puzzle, right? Not a single piece in a puzzle has the same shape and the same colors. But when put together, they sometimes make a beautiful piece of art.
Yeah, some of the worst pro teams in sports that have been put together are just 5 Kobe's. Just exactly. 5 people who want to keep taking the last shot and nobody to play defense and nobody to pass the ball. Right. Yeah, exactly right. Well, wonderful. This has been a great conversation, Alex. For people that want to find you online and keep the conversation going or find out more about you, can you let people know where they can find you online?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. Search for Alex Yarotsky. I think the link will be in the description to this video. It's pretty much the only social network I'm on. So
probably for the best.
Feel free to connect with me there.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for us today. Thank you so much, Alex, for being our guest. And thanks to each of you for listening. We hope to see you all next time. As we close out, we'd just like to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs, one last time, who would like me to remind you that sometimes it's hard to bridge the gap between business objectives and tech implementation, and it can get messy. This. Is trusted by top names like Meta, Google, and T-Mobile, and they love helping business leaders fulfill their strategic digital initiatives. Check them out at this.co. One more time, that's THISDOT.co. All right. Bye, everybody. Hope to see you all next time.
See you.